Hey guys, Bix Weir, road2root.com. I have a treat today. This is a treat going way back in my just after I got out of GATA. I was fighting the fight. John Adams was fighting his own fight in Australia, very similar to what we were fighting in the United States, but John took it farther than what the Road to Ruta did. John has experience in first of all, ladies and gentlemen, John Adams from Australia. John, how you doing? It's good to see you. It's been a long time. Give us a little idea of what you've been up to lately.
Hello, Bix. Thank you for having me back on your channel. We haven't spoken since 2021, so
Wow.
it's been a long time between drinks. So in 2021, when Silver Squeeze was happening and Perth Mint and unallocated, pull allocated was the rage of the international market. Um, uh, Basically, I went away from the precious metal sort of complex publicly for the last 2 3 years, but now I've sort of resurfaced and
What what
but
was
I
that?
mean.
Why'd you take off?
Here's an extraordinary story, Bix. Um, so what got me onto the Perth Mint, because I know you want to touch on that in today's discussion. What really got me going was when I've started buying silver in 2017. In 2018, I joined the industry working for another company. And then I started to learn who's who in the zoo, and I started to do a lot of reading. And it was actually a publication by Craig Hemke from TF Metals Report that really got me around this concept of fractional reserve, unallocated, pull allocated schemes. And so in 2019, I think in 2020, I wrote some public articles about the dangers of unallocated, pull allocated. And then February 2021, we had we had Silver Squeeze happen, and then I was getting stories from customers around the country in February and March of 2021 saying we can't get our silver out of the Perth Mint because people were seeking redemptions for unallocated, pull allocated, and the Perth Mint on their website had a 10-day, I think it was 10 days or less than 10 days time frame in which delivery must be done. And they were failing to meet their contractual obligation. And so that's why in March of 2021, I went public on Twitter and I said that the Perth Mint was in default. Wall Street Silver picked that up within 2 weeks. I think 365,000 impressions on that tweet happened, and then for about 6 7 weeks, unallocated, pull allocated was the talk of the industry worldwide. And there was you, me, David Morgan, Duncan Kaiser, Chris Marcus, the whole crew. We were talking about the dangers of unallocated, pull allocated. And one thing you've preached consistently on the road to Ruta is about counterparty risk. And if you don't own it, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And a lot of investors didn't actually understand what unallocated, pull allocated was. But now, in this period of time, Bix, I gave a bit of a clue, but I was holding my cards close to my chest because I mentioned in a couple of interviews around April and May of 2021 that there was an issue potentially with not just unallocated, pull allocated, but actually allocated. I.e., that where you actually buy the physical, you put it into a storage place, you are paying storage fees, and whether that metal is actually there. Now, I think there's a famous case that David Morgan put me on to around 2005, 2006. I think it was Morgan Stanley.
Yes, yeah.
There was a class action against them because they were supposed to buy physical silver and vault it, and they never did. And their legal defense in the class action was it was standard industry practice in the United States not to buy the silver. I go, look, what the hell? I mean, like I have to say, Bix, you Americans, sometimes you just amaze me with the brazenness of what you think what particularly the corrupt elite, what they think they can get away with. But now, what happened, Bix, is that in March of 2021, there was a woman from the south coast of New South Wales who went public on Wall Street Silver, and then it went viral. And she was a customer of ABC Bullion, which is one of the largest dealers in Australia. And that she sought redemption of her silver from the storage facility, or what she understood to be a storage facility, and basically she was told we don't have your silver, even though she was getting official statements from the company, even though she was paying storage fees. They said we didn't have the silver, and this was very specific silver. So there was some of the products that were in dispute were 10-ounce PAMP bars that had a unique pattern on them, and those were supposed to be in storage, so they didn't have them. And so, but here's the amazing story, Bix, is that 2 weeks after that woman went public, I ended up having dinner in Sydney with an employee of ABC Bullion, someone who's actually watched your channel in the past, and it was an extraordinary dinner. So we were talking about Perth Mint, we were talking about this woman in ABC Bullion, we were talking about just the general market conditions, and I noticed something was particularly sort of, something was not right in this dinner conversation, and I kept on saying to this guy, "Are you okay? I noticed that you don't seem yourself. Are you comfortable?" And Bix, I kid you not, it took me an hour of badgering this guy over dinner, and then he basically comes clean, and he basically says that, in essence, he said that ABC Bullion was running, in his view, again, not my opinion, not my conspiracy theory, but an ABC Bullion employee said that they were running a fractional reserve allocated scheme, and I was just shocked. So I said to him, "So how long has this been going on for?" He said to me, "At least a decade." I said, "How is this possible that the largest dealer in Australia could be running a fractional reserve scheme of immense scale and size, and no one was able to be able to pick it up?" And
real quick, when you say at least a decade, I found this in my archives, going back a little ways here, and I was kind of blown away. Let me share this with you. This is an article I wrote from January, 1 decade before, to the Perth Mint about their unallocated, allocated accounts and how they were running it. It was a Ponzi scheme. And the way they were doing it is basically telling people that we're holding their silver, but when the mint ran out of silver, they were using basically inventory that they were making all the silver coinage from. When the mint ran out of silver is when all of a sudden the unallocated accounts didn't have any silver in the account. And I was writing to this guy, how do you say his name? Stecky?
I think the pronunciation is Bron Selecki. That's the way I pronounce it.
Yeah. Well, he was a manager of the Mint, and he was writing me back. And this is the early days. I mean, this is 2011, so 10 years prior, and it blew up into something pretty damn big, in my opinion. I mean, I couldn't. The Perth Mint, I don't think was in direct ownership by the government. I'm not exactly sure how that worked. With the Perth Mint.
Yeah. So I was going to say Perth Mint is so it is 100% owned by the Western Australian state government.
Okay. And then there was another arm. It was their quote treasury arm called I think it was Gold Inc. or something of that nature. But that's where they were running their derivative book from. So I get into this long conversation with this guy via emails, and I was publishing everything at the time, and he just kept counteracting everything he said before in the prior email. And I'm like, just admit it. I have no problem with you running a legit allocated, unallocated pooled accounts. I think that's a great way. If people don't want to store their metal, but they have to understand there's third-party risk, but you got to tell the truth. And if you're telling people that you have their silver in an unallocated form, and at the same time the Perth Mint is declaring that they don't have any silver to make any of the silver products, then you have a problem, because you've run out of silver in inventories that you have unallocated people's claim on that silver. And that was the big thing. I said that's fraud in any country. And you are doing it. And then the Kitco was doing it with the Royal Canadian Mint. And I'm like, how is this even legal? So I'm spreading that word everywhere. And then the Perth Mint changed how they did things. And that might have been the 10 years that you're talking about. Maybe it went over to the, what is it, ABC Bullion?
Yes. So the company is called ABC Bullion.
So, I mean, if you move from, and this is, I see this all the time, when one entity that's rigging a market gets kind of called to the mat, like JP Morgan and the silver rigging, all of a sudden they'll just move it over to another entity, which JP Morgan did with their physical silver, moved it to Bank of America, and all of a sudden it was no longer JP Morgan, their house account on the COMEX. It was now their customer account, but it's the same con, just moved over to another entity. So that one entity gets in trouble, gets a little pat on the hand. Don't do that again. It just moved to another entity and another entity and another, and that sounds like the same thing is done right. That you're dealing with in Australia right now.
The thing is that one thing I'll say, Bix, is a couple of things. Is last year, the national broadcaster here in Australia did so. There's a current affairs program that runs every Monday night here in Australia called Four Corners, and they did an expose on the Perth Mint. And now it was a bit of a blown up story about this concept of gold doping and money laundering and things of that nature. The interesting thing there is that back in 2021, when you and I and Chris Markins and others were talking about the Perth Mint, the person who went public to defend the Perth Mint was the CEO, Richard Hayes. Within, I think, 8 months of him going public, he was sacked, and he was sort of exposed in this Four Corners piece as well. So very shady sort of state of operations under the Perth Mint. But the one thing that came from that program that I was just absolutely shocked and had no idea is that because it is owned by the government, people who work for the Perth Mint are sworn to secrecy provisions, and they face 5 years jail if they reveal any confidential information at the Perth Mint. So when you're engaging with Bron Selecki and saying, well, why don't you just tell me the truth? Well, here's the thing. If it was, and again, I can't speak to what was happening in 2011 because I wasn't in the market. But whatever was happening, if anything was anything untoward, if he actually came clean with you, he could have faced 5 years jail. And so that's actually quite one interesting thing, because most of the bullion dealers in Australia are private companies, and yet the major public institutions, the Perth Mint, and because it's enacted by the state parliament, they've made it a criminal offence to reveal the secrets of the mint, which is like, why would you do business when you talk about counterparty risk and the counterparty has to keep their mouth shut, otherwise they're going to go to jail? Why would you even touch it? It's just too risky.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had whistleblowers in the U.S. Bart Chilton is a famous one. One of the two judges at the CFTC. The CFTC only has two judges for the entire market, for people dealing on the COMEX, the futures and options market. And there was two judges, and one judge finally came out and said, I quit. This is a rigged market. And this other judge, all he does is lets the bank do whatever they want. All the commercials can do whatever they want. He never stops them and never has brought up one case against them in 20 years being a judge. And he writes this as his resignation letter to the public, and it's still on the CFTC website, his resignation letter, and everybody's going, oh my God, finally someone admitted, from an official position, which is, you can't get more official than a judge at the CFTC when there's only two, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. It's like the rig moves to a different area every single time. So I know you've been years fighting the government, involved in the government, working with the government to expose the government. I gave that up a long time ago because I just saw it as literally I'd be chasing my tail, like a dog chasing his tail, because yes, you can get them every time. Like, I interviewed the head of Silver Eagle sales at the U.S. Mint. This guy, Jack Sherman, amazing guy. He's 70 something years old. He's still head of sales. And he says, yeah, we're doing these 5 things that are completely illegal. And he's like, nothing you can do about it. And it's true. This is the head of Silver Eagle sales. At the time, it was the largest national silver coin made. Now I think the Maple Leaf is beat it, because the new head of the mint can't make a Silver Eagle to save her life. But you have confessions from people in the know within the government, and nothing is ever done. These people control the politicians, they control, and it's a revolving door between politicians and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and great examples. The CFTC, there was a commissioner. What was his name? I call him Mr. Magoo. I forgot his name because he looked like that cartoon, Mr. Magoo. He went from the CFTC to the DTCC, being in charge of the mint at 55 Water Street. And literally within 2 months, they had transferred all the derivative contracts, the paper derivative contracts, to 55 Water Street. And within 2 months, Hurricane Sandy hits and he leaves the vault door wide open and floods the entire thing. They take a month to pump it out and then they light it on fire. That's the kind of crap we're dealing with when we're dealing with corrupt politicians and political structures that they claim to be, oh, we're the government. We're here to protect the people. They aren't. They're here to do what they're told and obfuscate the truth.
Well, okay. So I mean, one thing I was going to say, Bix, is so I'll get into a little bit of because I know you want to sort of touch on some of the conspiracies, and we can talk about the conspiracy that happened in like a literal conspiracy, not just some wild idea, but what actually happened during the investigation in terms of ABC bullion. But I'll just make this point is because of what happened with JP Morgan in 2010, because I heard from you, from Gadda, from when Chris Marcus interviewed Bart Shilton, I heard all these warnings about what happens in America when you go after unethical or corrupt practices. They get protected by the government. So I was very conscious. So in 20, so we talked about what happened in 2021. Now, so you got to understand, Bix, I've been doing economics now for 25 years. I'm 43. I started at 16 years old, but I've never been a lawyer. I didn't understand the law. I've never ran a formal investigation. So during 2021 and early 2022, I decided to drop everything and start my own privately funded investigation using professional lawyers and barristers and auditors, etc., to uncover what I understood this ABC bullion situation to be. And in April 2022, I delivered a 608-page file to. Here's the thing: we don't have the CFTC, we don't have an equivalent of the CFTC in Australia, but we have what we call the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, which is the rough equivalent would be the SEC. So, but they look at many things. So they have one of the widest remits in the world in terms of comparative regulators. So they actually regulate companies as well as the financial markets. So legal advice I got said, okay, go to ASIC. And so I went to ASIC, and now the chances of me coming off the street, going to ASIC and saying, I want a criminal investigation into this company, literally, according to their own numbers, the chances of is 0.36%. It is almost impossible to get an investigation. Now, because I had invested so much time and my file of evidence was extremely thorough, signed off by professional lawyers and barristers, we got the investigation. So I actually was able to achieve mission impossible, but I was still very conscious of what happened in America. So what I did was, initially I was going after the ABC bullion, but then I thought to myself, well, to protect myself, because I don't want the same thing that happened to Andrew Maguire to happen to me. I turned my fire onto the cops, and so in October of 2022. I wrote a 70-page report into the performance of the regulator. So I actually found some statistics from the annual report. I was able to tell a very compelling story as to why their performance was bad and was failing. So I published a public report in October 2022. They got national headlines around Australia. And anyone can look this up. Go to Google instead, type in, John Adams ASIC ABC. So an ABC is for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and you're going to see an article about economist says that ASIC only investigates less than 1% of complaints. And so we got the national media, and then 3.5 weeks after the publicity about my public report, the Australian Senate. So I took the fight to Parliament, and the Australian Senate established an inquiry. So they voted 43-20. So I went to Parliament and said, I want an inquiry because these statistics and this performance of this agency is woeful. I want an inquiry. So I got an inquiry. And then the inquiry ran for 21 months. So in July of this year, 2024, Senator Andrew Bragg, who's a senator from New South Wales, he delivered a 300 page plus report into the performance of ASIC, and the conclusion is it is so bad that he recommends that ASIC be abolished, and
Wow.
we create like and we come up with two new regulators to actually reform the system. So the one thing I'll say is that ASIC has been a long running problem in Australia. Its performance is bad and getting worse. And so one of the differences between the American approach and my approach was to say, well, I can't just go to the cops and trust the cops to do the right thing. I have to change. I have to go after the cops at the same time to provide myself some form of insurance, and that was some success. So we actually did get an inquiry. The inquiry has called for ASIC to be abolished, and now there is, we're going to a federal election very soon in Australia, and there'll be a number of policy announcements from various political parties of how to fix ASIC. Because, can I say this, Bix? And this is something that's never happened in my career. In early August of this year, I did a YouTube video with a guy called Robbie Barwick, and we talked about that ASIC. We didn't hold back. We put all of our cards on the table, and within 2 weeks, we got a handwritten letter in a official ASIC envelope. So this is an official government envelope, and inside is official ASIC government stationery, and it's a handwritten note, and it says, confidential due to culture of fear. Dear John Adams, your videos are 100% spot on. I've been here for a very long time. It's the worst it's ever been. It's worse than what you portray. So when we talk about corruption, one of the key differences here in Australia is I have people inside the regulator prepared to risk their job to write to me on official government stationery and say the corruption is 100% legitimate. It's real. And the people at the top of the regulator are thoroughly corrupt. And it's just unbelievable. And I've shown this letter to people in the mainstream media here in Australia and various politicians, etc. And I've just said to them, I've been doing politics for more than 20 years. I've never seen a situation where, and I used to be a public servant. I used to work in the federal bureaucracy myself, and that's when I started my career after university. I've just never seen a situation where someone was prepared to write to a YouTuber effectively and risk their career and say that my allegation of corruption is 100% legitimate. So when you talk about corruption in the US system, we have ethical public servants prepared to write to me and say the corruption is 100% real. And so when you want to, I know you want to talk about conspiracy. So ABC Bullion was investigated. And we can get into this in a moment. So there was a conspiracy to protect ABC Bullion, and I've been able to expose it, and there's been a number of media articles in the last 2 months that has actually gone into a lot of detail as to what I was able to find. But so now one thing before I get into further, was there anything you wanted to respond to that, or do you want to just sort of keep going?
Well, was ABC Bullion, did they have any connection with the Mint or Gold Corp?
So from a legal structure, no, there's no legal connection. But there is. So one of the things that is well known in the Australian industry is that staff from ABC Bullion have gone to the Perth Mint and vice versa. So Mr. Selecki, who wasn't transparent with you back in 2011, well, guess where after he left the Perth Mint after a long stint, and where did he go? He went to ABC Bullion. And then he was there for a period of time, and then he went to the Perth Mint. So you have, I mean, look, the two biggest players in the market have a lot of back and forth between staff, and then you have a whole bunch of smaller businesses, second to third tier bullion dealers, who are obviously sort of trying to service the rest of the market.
Do you know if they have any reciprocal metal storage programs where ABC will store metal in Perth Mint vaults and vice versa?
Well, no, I think during my investigation, I saw no evidence of that.
Okay. It would just make sense to me that because there is a lot of double counting. You look at JP Morgan's control of SLV, and they're also the number one holder of inventories for the comics. And a lot of people have surmised that that's one and the same. There's a lot of crossover between the comics inventories and the SLV inventories, which is completely illegal if you ask me. Now, you can look at the prospectus of the SLV and say, holy crap, this thing's like Swiss cheese as to where they can store the metal. And I do think a lot of rehypothecation has gone on with SLV inventory, with the comics inventory, with LBMA inventories, which nobody knows where those are. I think they're all three double, triple, quadruple counted, maybe even with the Perth Mint as well. I can't prove that, but knowing the proclivity of JP Morgan to do things exactly like that, I would say it's more than a lucky guess if that ends up to be the truth, when we hit a point that everybody has to show what they have, and a lot of people will be going without, especially in SLV. I think at some point they're going to close up SLV, and then they'll use that as a moment in time to say, oh, there's 500 million ounces of silver going to hit the market. Let's slam the price of silver with derivatives. I could see that happen pretty easily with the people who are involved, BlackRock and JP Morgan and a company called Virtu Financial, who does all the high frequency trading on the comics. So, from my standpoint, and you've taken it so much further than I ever did, I've taken it upon myself to try to expose as much as I can, but I do hit a point where it's like I don't have the time, effort, energy, or money to fight these fights into a system that I know even the judges are corrupt. So, good on you for getting farther than I ever got down there in Australia.
Well, one thing I was going to say, Bix, is as you were just making that sort of statement, you said something which is very critical. Is when you were talking about J.P. Morgan and where the storage is, you go in terms of some of it you don't know where it is, and that is the critical issue with this ABC bullion sort of story. So in 2021, so when I had basically an ABC Bullion employee who at the time was working at ABC Bullion, who basically admitted to me he was lying to investors on a daily basis because that was what he was required to do. He had no idea whether there was a vault and where the vault was. Now we had a smoking gun. So now this person who I ended up having dinner with, he ended up actually being a whistleblower who we put forward to ASIC and was interviewed by ASIC during the investigation. But we had a smoking gun, and the smoking gun was a WhatsApp group chat of 7 current and former seven current former ABC Bullion employees. And so during this period of 2020, March and April 2021, when we're talking about Perth Mint, and I was tweeting about ABC Bullion and about this woman who couldn't get her silver, these people at ABC Bullion in this group chat were confessing to fraud. That they were basically saying, we know we're running a fraud scheme. So again, this is not defamatory. This is not a John Adams conspiracy theory. ABC Bullion current and former employees, including the former second in charge, a guy called John Feeney, who's still in the industry, they're the ones saying the company is engaged in fraud. And so it's like, well, I was stunned when I was given this information, and so these confessions happened over a 3-week period, and there was over 70 pages of WhatsApp messages that I was able to obtain, and it's just absolutely damning that people inside the company are admitting to lying to investors, lying to the market, and obviously in their own mind they believe they are part of a fraud scheme. And now, if anyone goes to, for example, to my Twitter account or to my Instagram account or Facebook or in terms of Telegram, in the last 24 hours, this guy, John Feeney, some of the things that he actually said in this group chat, I've actually now published online. So again, you can go read in your own words what he actually said. The other thing I'll say before I get into some of the other detail, Bix, is if anyone wants to read some of the detailed media articles about this, you can go to Google and type in Michael West Media and ABC and you're going to see 3 articles that have been published over the last couple of months, and these go into detail. But Bix, in 2021, if you were a storage client of ABC Bullion and you said to them, "Take me to the vault," they said you're not allowed to see it. Confidentiality, privacy, security. Sorry, the thing is, we're not going to show you where your metal is. Take us on trust.
Do you know how big it is?
But here's the thing.
Bullion is?
Sorry?
Do you know how big ABC Bullion is? Like, do you know how much they were supposedly storing for customers?
Well, no, but look, well, here's the thing. I remember in 2021, you did a couple of, I think you did a video where you were going through the Perth Mint bar list, I think, for the unallocated or pool allocated program, where they actually published some detail. ABC Bullion is completely opaque. So now they claim in their own documentation they have tens of thousands of storage clients, and you think to yourself, if it's so. Our understanding from our whistleblower was there was at least 20 to 30,000 storage clients,
Wow.
and which is very large. So this is why when I was trying to think about proving if this alleged fraud was real or not, it's like, well, where is the vault? I mean, because it's not just a small vault. If you're having 20 to 30,000 clients, and I remember in 2019, 2020, 2021. There was a massive increase in buying of silver, and when you think about this issue, it's while because some people in Australia, including in Parliament, who've talked about ABC Bullion, have talked about this as a gold crime. It's actually a silver crime, and the reason why it's a silver crime is that because of the gold to silver ratio. For example, $100,000 of silver requires a much more larger physical space compared to $100,000 worth of gold. So when I really think about it, what was what was the bulk of it missing? I think there was a lot of silver missing because of this in terms of the space requirements. So now there was a couple of other sort of red flags that happened. In March of 2021, on ABC Bullion's website, they said, if you seek a redemption, we'll give it to you in 48 hours. And then once this woman went public, they changed the website to say it's now going to take us 10 days to get your metal. And I'm thinking to myself, hang on. So if you could retrieve it from the vault in 2 days, why did you need an extra 8 in terms of why do you need to go to 10 days? Why the extra 8 days? What's that about? And so now one of the things I wanted to understand to see, well, is there a vault? Is there not a vault? Is I actually hired private investigators in 2021, and I actually came up with scripts, and I said to these investigators, you're going to be potential investors. You're going to call up ABC Bullion. I'm going to pay you. You've got to do 4 different employees on 4 different days. This is the script. There are some questions that get the conversation going, and then there were some questions that are highlighted in yellow. You must ask these questions, and then you're going to produce me a transcript of each of the phone calls, because I want to see when you talk to these different employees, where's the vault? And guess what, Bix? Different answers. Some people actually said that the vault was actually in the store. Like in the store in the Sydney CBD, and I knew that was a lie because our whistleblower and this group chat basically said there's no vault in the store, so they were absolutely lying. Because if the vault was actually in the main store in Sydney, why would you need 10 business days? You should be like 10 minutes. Walk to the vault, get out the product, and then you go. So that clearly was a lie, and so all the employees were basically lying to these people, and so this was the great mystery. Now, I could have come out in 2021 and exposed this, but I thought to myself, well, what I really need is the government to use their powers of a search warrant to go look for the stuff. And that's why ultimately I went to ASIC to say, well, I think the law's been broken. We have credible evidence. We have confessions. We have a whistleblower. We have all this inconsistency among the employees talking to investors. So I thought, okay, let's go to the cops. So when we went to the police, and here's where the corruption comes in. Bix, let me look, this is not a trick question. If I said to you gold and silver was missing as a part of an alleged fraud scheme, how long would you expect investigators to go look, to physically go look for the gold and silver? So if this was the FBI,
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: if this was the CFTC or the SEC or the FBI, how long would it take FBI to go physically look for gold and silver? Do you think?
Well, a good investigator that would be the first thing they do. Before it saying, "Hey, I'm investigating you," they say, "Oh, I'm here. Here's the investigation. Here's my search warrant. Show me where the gold is right now."
Precisely. Now, how long do you think it took ASIC before they physically left their office?
I have no idea.
9.5 months. 9.5 months into, so this investigation went for 13 months. They spent $300,000 and they physically did not leave the office for 9.5 months. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? So this is why Parliament has basically said that ASIC is useless and it's broken, because it's not just this investigation. What the parliamentary inquiry found was many investigations were completely deficient. And there's a lot of unethical practices that are happening at the regulator. But 9.5 months, and yet, literally all they had to do, like I kid you not, Bix, in the Sydney Central Business District, the ASIC office in Sydney is on a place called Market Street. ABC Bullion store was literally 500 meters from the ASIC office. They literally had to walk 5 minutes and present a search warrant and say, show us the gold and silver. They couldn't walk 5 minutes. They waited 9.5 months. And what happened in that 9.5 months? Two critical things happened. During the So in October 2022, and again, Bix, you want conspiracies? Nothing in your history in the silver market is going to beat this. None other than the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese held a press conference with ABC while they're under investigation by his own government, and he said, "This is a great company. This is an Australian success story. They've come from nothing. We should embrace this company." I mean, and because I've raised this issue in Parliament. Sometimes politicians say, well, sometimes you don't know if, because politicians go to functions all the time. Someone may pull them aside and want a photo op or something like that. But this was not just a random photo op. This was a pre-scheduled national press conference, standing shoulder to shoulder with ABC Bullion, saying they are great. During a criminal investigation. In the history of Australia, you have never seen such blatant corruption in my life. Now, and people have said to me, well, maybe the Prime Minister wasn't aware that the company was under investigation. So the tax office, the Australian tax office, has gone after the same people that ABC Bullion and its parent company, Palion, for a decade over alleged tax fraud matters. And the scale of what the tax office was trying to recoup was over $200 million. So the Prime Minister would have known about the tax issues, because that's been in the press for a decade. And yet for some reason, even his staff just went and said, okay, we're going to. So whether they knew it was under investigation, not, who knows? But here's the so now you want to obviously ask is you want to obviously know the answer. So where was the gold and silver? Now, so there's a location in the Sydney CBD at a place called 74 Castle Ray Street, and so I was told in 2021 by a former manager that there was supposedly a private vault behind a fake door in one of the locations controlled by ABC Bullion. And behind that fake door was a private vault of 10 by 10 meters, so 100 square meters. And in that vault was the storage, but also company inventory, and it was all mixed together. And so when I got told this by this former manager, I said, "Did you ever see it?" He said, "No." Now, what did I do last year? I actually got to go into that location. That fake door is open, and I walked into the space. And it's not 100 square meters; it's 21 square meters. Yeah, I mean it is tiny. And this is supposed to be the largest dealer in Australia, and the so-called private vault was super tiny. Not enough to hold storage for in terms of all the customers they purport to have. Now, 3.5 weeks. So this is what happened. The 4th of July, 2022, the investigation starts. On the 7th of July, ASIC tells ABC Bullion you're under investigation because they issued them a legal notice called a Section 30 notice and asked them to hand over books and records. 3.5 weeks later, whatever bullion was in this small room was moved to a building in another part of Sydney. Now, ABC Bullion claims that there were other buildings with bullion in them, but there's no record of where those other locations are. But here's the critical thing. This building that they moved the bullion into was illegal. So under state law, what had happened was they had leased this building in 2021. They were doing a redevelopment of the building. And basically, when you want to change the use of a building or if you want to do a redevelopment, you have to go through a legal process. But the last part of the process, and this would be very common in the United States as well, is you need an occupation certificate. So they did not have an occupation certificate to store bullion in this building, and they did all these construction works of the building, which was completely illegal. They didn't have approval from the local council. They didn't have a construction certificate. They didn't, they were supposed to appoint what they call a principal certifying authority. They were supposed to get all these paperwork in place. But before you can use the building, you need an occupation certificate. For 2 years, they did not have an occupation certificate. And when they get it, in August of this year, as soon as the media exposed them for running an illegal storage program. So you're never going to catch, illegal behavior as blatant as this. So the local government, the local council, I have now an official letter from the local council, and they have said that the use of this building was unlawful. It was illegal, and they have taken action against the company using the building illegally. So I'm thinking to myself, so they move bullion from a legal place. So it's a place where it was originally, this 21 square meters place was legal, no issue there, but they move it to an illegal place 3.5 weeks into the ASIC and criminal investigation. So Bix, if this was a legitimate storage program, why would ABC Bullion do something like this? Now, via a couple of tricky techniques, we confronted the managing director of ABC Bullion, a woman called James Simpson. So, she's the one who runs the company. It was her decision to move the metal from a legal place to an illegal place.
So why? What was the reason for the move?
So they had a two-part element. The first part was that the company had begun operating from this new building in July 2022 after a 3-year design, construction, fit-out process, and they said this building was officially opened by the Prime Minister in October 2022. So here's the thing: the Prime Minister's press conference, national press conference endorsing ABC Bullion, was at the illegally occupied building, and they said that they had opened this building in July 2022, the same month as the ASIC investigation starts, and this was after a 3-year design, construction, fit-out process. Well, that's a complete lie because it was illegal. And there was never a 3D design, construction, fit-out process because we have all the paperwork. Now, they have a second alibi, and the second alibi was that they had a storage consolidation program to this particular building, which was pre-scheduled for July 2022, a two-year storage consolidation plan, and it just so happens it's in the same month that the ASIC investigation starts. What a coincidence, Bix. So this is their reasons. They began operating from a building after a 3-year design, construction, fit-out process, lie, and then they say we had a storage consolidation program to this particular building, which was illegal, 2 years in the works, pre-scheduled for July 2022, just a coincidence with the ABC Bullion investigation. Now, on this issue of the storage consolidation plan, so we did a FOIA request, or what we call in Australia a Freedom of Information request, to ASIC, and we basically said to them, we'll hand over the consolidation plan, because if you did a thorough investigation and the company says that they have a storage consolidation plan, well, surely you've got the plan. So we got a letter in May of this year, and ASIC said we have no documents about a storage consolidation plan. So it's like, well, hang on, there's no evidence that there was ever a storage consolidation plan. And obviously this whole 3-year design, construction, fit out process is a complete bogus. So to me, there's only one reason why you would move metal at the start of a criminal investigation from a legal place to a legal place, and it's called a cover-up.
Yeah.
And but this is the thing: it's a cover-up financed by the cops, financed by taxpayers, and this level of corruption is just off the scales. And now we have people inside ASIC risking their careers, writing me handwritten letters saying that their leadership team is systematically corrupt.
Yeah.
We talk about how fallen the United States is with, when you look at, say, Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the scale of the corruption in that family. The corruption in Australia is literally off the charts. When I go to certain publications in the mainstream media in Australia, some of them are not prepared to touch it. Now, I was able to find one publication where they thought that this was a legitimate news story, and I could because I have all the documents. This is why I was away for 3.5 years, Bix, because to get this is the one thing I learned in this process. So in 2021, I knew nothing about the law. I knew nothing about investigations or evidence, but what I learned is to actually go collect the evidence that is at the standard required for law enforcement or the courts. It's not an easy process. It's very hard. And so one of the reasons why these practices continue to happen around the world, whether Canada, Kitco, or in terms of United States or UK or here, it's because some investor or some commentator has to roll up their sleeves and actually go collect the evidence, and they actually have to, as you say, get the money, pay for legal advice, and actually put the case together. And so I decided to do that. Now, people may want to say, well, what happened? So last year, once they finished the so-called investigation, ASIC wrote to me, my barrister, and said, we've conducted a thorough investigation, and we can't find any evidence of a crime.
Mhm.
Now, from September of last through to June of this year, this is where we were able to reconstruct the timeline of the ASIC investigation using an extensive use of FOIA requests and questions via Parliament. And that's where we were able to use, again, a few different techniques to get, we found a way to get the company talking. And so we have a whole host of emails where the company basically was, explained what their behavior was. And so I produced in June of this year a 200-page critical review report backed up by independent legal advice. And we said this illegal cover-up, these specific areas of federal law have been broken. ASIC, it's your job to now go enforce federal law. Because one of the key things, Bix, is that, now here's the thing, if ASIC knew the building was illegally occupied and they looked the other way, well, that's corruption. If ASIC had no idea it was illegally occupied, well, then they were misled. And if you mislead investigators during criminal investigation, it's a criminal offense to lie to the cops. And so that was one of the issues we wanted to go and say, hey, well, if you got tricked by these people, well, you got to go after them for lying to you. So that's one. But this is the other critical thing is that the issue of insurance. ABC Bullion say publicly that if you store with that company, their bullion, investor bullion is fully insured. So you tell me this, Bix, which insurance company is going to provide insurance on a building that is legally occupied? Basically no one. So now they do have an insurance policy, but did the company tell the insurance company that the building was illegal? I bet you they didn't.
Yeah.
And so this was another sort of big issue that we wanted ASIC to pursue, both in terms of civil or criminal law, because investors have been paying for insurance for 2 years. And I'm saying it was never insured because no insurance is going to give a policy if they know that the building was illegally occupied. So again, last year they said we can't find the evidence. Now, when I produced this critical review report and I was able to put it all together in explicit detail back by independent legal advice, I went to ASIC. I've referred the people at the top of ASIC to the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which is a new body that was created, and I basically said. But I basically handed over to ASIC and said, well, I caught you. This is where the cover up is. What did they do with it? They literally threw my report in the bin. So I gave it to them in June, and then by the end of July, they said, we're not doing anything with it. And they wrote me a letter in August of this year and saying, we're doing nothing. Now, but this is the critical thing, Bix. Last year they said to me, "We're doing nothing because we don't have the evidence." So this year, when I have the evidence, they have provided me no reason for why they're taking no action.
Yeah.
And there is no reason for them not to take action because we caught them red-handed.
Yeah.
And yet ASIC is basically going to sweep this under the carpet, protected by the Prime Minister and the government, and protected by certain journalists and the mainstream media, and they're going to just hope that this all goes away. And this is why it's so critical that your channel and other channels in the alternative media, we get to have these open discussions about these issues because the corruption in the West is so out of control. And having gone through this journey, Bix, I knew there was corruption beforehand, but now that I've seen it and like up close and I've actually experienced it, the level of corruption in my country is at a scale that I never could have even imagined.
Well, I thank you for the story, and it is reminiscent of things that we have dealt with in the United States with CFTC, which is the regulator for silver. They ran 3 investigations and couldn't find anything, supposedly. The last investigation, it went over the time frame of 5 years, so JP Morgan thought they got away with it. And then lo and behold, Trump comes in and says, literally, the Trump Justice Department, not the CFTC, Trump Justice Department had to come in and say, oh, by the way, JP Morgan, we're busting you for rigging silver and gold markets from 2008 to 2013 or 14. Wait a minute. This is the same time frame that the CFTC was running investigations, literally had people in the offices of JP Morgan. They couldn't find anything, nothing. Then Bart Chilton says, yeah, we found them. They made a political decision not to prosecute, not to stop them. And Trump, having the balls that he does, ultimately did, because JP Morgan was trying to destroy the economy so Trump wouldn't win the next election. All this stuff, and I hats off to you for running these things down in Australia, and the guys at GATA here who've run a lot of this down here. What does it tell you? It all comes down to why I've been screaming for 25 years. If you're going to be an investor, I don't care what you're investing in, it better be in your own possession or you're not going to have any say over it. If you're going to be an investor in silver, get the physical silver, get it in your own possession, because no matter what promises you're being told by regulators, by storage facilities, by your best friend, at the end of the day, if you don't have it in your possession, you don't own it. And I think we're coming to that point where everything falls apart. The fiat monetary system, the entire structure of corruption is going to be pulled apart, yanked apart, ripped apart, and we're going to end up with what we have. And a lot of people will be crying that they let somebody else held, no matter what asset it is, cryptos, stocks, bonds, metals, you name it. You will be crying in your soup that you didn't take the advice of guys like John and myself. Get your assets in your own possession, because that's the only thing that's going to save you from the corruption. If you have your assets and you can secure them, in the United States, we like our guns, not because of hunting or protection. We need to protect ourselves from the government, is my take. And I think that's the most important thing, important reason to have guns. I don't know what, I think you have not a very lenient gun structure in Australia. But in the United States, no country's ever going to try to invade us because everybody's got a gun. And I hate saying that because I didn't believe in guns for a very long time. But I think the entire world should be able to secure a gun for their own protection against their government, the people who govern over them, people who take charge and tell you how to live. I think that's the most important thing.
Totally. Now, look, Bix, I don't know how much more time we have for this conversation,
Yeah, a little bit.
but one thing I'd like to come back and maybe in another video is so I do agree with you. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. But now, so I'll probably finish off with a couple of points now. In terms of my personal holdings, so I do have some with me, but the bulk of my holdings is actually at a storage facility in a part of Australia. And so one, there are some legitimate reasons for why you may want a third-party storage facility. And what I've learned in this process is, here's the thing: investors, particularly in my country, don't do enough due diligence about bullion, about storage, to be able to know what are the red flags to look for, both in terms of some of the obvious questions, but also in terms of some of the legalities. But then obviously, how do you know you're dealing with an ethical service or not? And so these are some things that I've been able to pick up over the last 3 years. And for those that want to use storage, whether in Australia or in the United States, I think it's well worth to say, well, if you want to go down that path, these are the things to particularly look for. And maybe we can come back and in the next few weeks and talk about that further. But the other thing is that, so the last time we spoke, Bix, I was working for I was working for a particular bullion dealer here in Australia as their chief economist. Now, last year, I actually decided to open up my own shop. So there's a new player in town called Adams Bullion. So I have a business partner called, he's based in Melbourne, so we have a shop down there, and we're sort of we're sort of expanding, and part of the reason to I guess put money where my mouth is to basically say, well, there has to be a player in the industry that's actually going to provide an ethical service and actually be, and not just legally compliant, but actually tell the investors what's really going on. But also when investors want to be assured that they're dealing with someone who's actually on their side. Me and Sam wanted to be a part of that story, and that's why we decided to open up our own shop. Because again, the regulatory landscape in America could be different, but this is one of the things I learned in Australia is gold and silver is unregulated in Australia. So so we have a federal piece of law called the Corporations Act 2001. And there's a chapter in the Corporations Act which is called Chapter 7. And Chapter 7 talks about financial products, financial services businesses. And under that regime of Chapter 7, there's a whole host of obligations you have to do. There's a whole host of compliance that you have to do. And if you break some of that compliance and that licensing and registration stuff, that's when you can get into legal hot water. But here's the one thing that Parliament did, and for reasons that is still not unclear to me. Section 763C of the Corporations Act says that bullion is exempt from Chapter 7. So it's gold and silver and not only gold and silver, but platinum is not seen as a financial product. And because it's not a financial product, a lot of the investor protections that most Australians expect. So when you're investing in, say, stocks or bonds or managed funds or mutual funds, or if you're dealing with insurance companies or if you're dealing with banks, there's a whole host of protections that investors get. The gold and silver industry in Australia don't have those protections, and that's why it's literally in my country the Wild West. There are some ethical players. There's a lot of unethical people, and there's a lot of dark practices. But most investors don't know what these dark practices are. They don't know who's good and who's bad. And because there's an exemption in the law, a lot of these people have been have been able to escape detection for a very long time because no one inside the federal government is actually looking at this industry in close detail to make sure that these people are actually providing a legal and ethical service. So now maybe you want to make a couple of comments about whether gold and silver regulators are gold and silver dealers in America are regulated. I mean, before Andy Shackman moved to Florida, I think he was in Minnesota. So maybe Miles Franklin was regulated under state law, and maybe there was some some compliance work that Andy had to do there. But in Australia, it's literally the Wild West.
Okay, and that makes sense. And yes, it is extreme to think someone investing a lot of money in gold and silver can keep it in their own possession. It's too dangerous. And there's pros and cons to both. I would tell everybody you need to make up your own mind about what you can protect, what your storage capabilities are, and who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with a reputable person near to your house? I mean, I always say the second best option for not keeping it with you would be a sound facility with good people near your place of residence, so that if the shit falls apart or starts to fall apart, it's a no more than a couple hour drive for you to get to your metal. If and this is into the world type of stuff, or into the financial world, and I do believe the end of the financial world is happening. So it's taking on a much more urgent tone in my postings, because I think we're at this point where fiat money is about to go bye bye. There's $3 quadrillion in derivatives about to melt down, and all the banks are insolvent at the moment. If you look at the FDIC numbers on unrealized losses, so I just think right now is the time of protect yourself the best you can, because you're all you got in this world when the banking system falls down. Because don't look for the government to come save you, because that's kind of the scariest. What is it? The scariest words ever mentioned is, "Hey, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you," and that does not happen in America. Unfortunately, it did in the past, but it hasn't. And Australia, I'm sure you guys got your own issues with your government. We've been going for an hour now. John, tell people how to get in touch with you. Great stuff. Thank you for sharing with my customers and people who view my videos and the Road to Root of Family. How do they get in touch with you and find out more about what you're doing?
Sure. So yeah. So probably a couple of ways. I mean, in terms of our bullion dealership, it's Adams Bullion, so adamsbullion.com. I mean, in terms of social media, I mean, you can find me on in terms of X, Instagram, Facebook, Telegram. If you just look for Adams Economics, you'll be able to find me all over the place. I mean, the other alternative is if you want to email me directly, john@adamseconomics.com. I'm happy to take any questions from any of your viewers over in America.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending time. And we'll talk soon. Talk really soon about, as things fall apart. I'd love to get your take on how our governments are dealing with the issues.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time, Bix. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. Bye bye.